Hello and welcome to Tuesday Talks. I'm Dr. Al Freeman, Director of LCMS School Ministry. Thank you for joining us. We are here with Dave Kueshel, who is our guest presenter for Tuesday Talks to discuss communications. And today it will be about communications differentiation. Last month it was consistent communication. This month it's maybe inconsistent or consistent in a different way. And there we go. Communication. And we're very blessed to have Dave with us. And again, we give thanks to Concordia Plans and all of their support for our Lutheran schools, and also the support of having Dave be able to come and join us and present on Tuesday Talks. Dave, you got a great story, a great background. And, you know, the first couple ones I stole your thunder and kind of told everything about you. The last one and this one, I'm going to let you self-introduce.
All right, awesome. So thank you, Al and Will, and thank you everyone for joining us. Third month we've done this and touched on some good stuff, and I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to be here as we talk about school communications.
I bet you're thinking it doesn't seem like more than 6-7 months that we've been doing this, right?
Yeah, it's flown by. So differentiating communications for your various audiences, that's what we're here to talk about today. As Al said, I'll take the moment to introduce myself. I am with Concordia Plans, been 8.5 years-ish now. Senior Director of Communications there. Love working at Concordia Plans. It's a great place to be. It's a great organization. And if you're involved in the Concordia Plans, thank you. I did spend 10 years in public school communications. Before coming to Concordia Plans, I worked for 2 different school districts in the St. Louis area and a consortium of school districts. So a lot of different experiences, and had a lot of different exposure to a lot of school communications topics there. And I am an LCMS school parent. My 2 daughters have gone to LCMS schools from pre-K through high school. One is currently a sophomore at Lutheran South here in St. Louis, and one is finishing her first year at Concordia, Chicago. So really, really happy to be here and share what I can about communications, kind of with that public school and Lutheran school background. And I was on the school board at Green Park Lutheran School here in St. Louis for 6 years also. So that's about me. I'm going to move forward here. And Al kind of mentioned, we did talk last month about consistent communications and being consistent in our messaging. If anyone joined us, it was called, Are We All Talking About the Same School? And today we're talking about differentiated communication. So why are we doing that? It seems like the opposite. They really do fit together well, actually. When we talked about consistent messaging, we were talking about big ideas, right? And big ways to position your school, or that you want your school to be perceived. I walked through last month the whole process we went through at Green Park right before COVID, where we talked about mission and vision for the school and trying to get everyone on the same page in the way we talk about our school and the benefits that can bring. So consistent messaging is really important for your school. As you talk about how are you positioned in your community, how do you want people to perceive you, maybe related, as I have here, to major announcements, maybe related to changes or initiatives. The core of that communication should be consistent. You want to deliver the same message to these different audiences. But we also have a need to differentiate. So the way the message is delivered to a specific audience probably should be a little bit different based on who that audience is. And we'll talk on the next few slides about what kind of considerations you should have when thinking about those different audiences. The words you use, the context you provide may need to be different, probably should be different in a lot of cases. Some specific words have more meaning to different people, to different groups, different phrasing. And so all of that is considerations on kind of how we can communicate consistently, but also different to really make the messages resonate with those that we're trying to reach as effectively as possible. So why do we differentiate communications? Well, not everyone receives information the same way, right? So if you think of yourself and maybe a coworker or maybe someone else who's related to a ministry you're involved in, but in a different role, you might view things differently. You have a different relationship to the school. You have a different relationship to the communicator. That could be the principal or the executive director, whoever that might be. You have certain past experiences that impact the way that you hear things and receive information. And you also have other messaging inputs in your world. You have a lot of things competing for your attention, and you have a lot of messages that are coming to and through you. And so those impact the way you hear things. Now, these are written kind of like every individual, and certainly you're not going to differentiate your communications for every single individual you're talking to. But when you think about the groups, which we'll get into in a second, the groups that you're talking to, they do kind of have some common themes, and parents might view your school one way and teachers another and things like that. So consider the different groups and kind of where they're coming from, and we'll have more about that a little bit later. And of course, it makes your communications more effective. Some words, some phrases, some context will mean more to people, to different audiences than others. And I really believe that whatever time you're going to spend differentiating your message will reward you in the long run, especially on really critical topics that are really important to your school and that are important to communicate about.
I really like where you have not everyone receives information the same way in your relationship with school, communicator, past experiences. One of the phrases I used to use with our faculty, our development, missions, is their perception is their reality.
Absolutely.
And we can fight that as much as we want, but you're not going to change that perception by getting into a battle and a war. You change it by the way you communicate and communicating effectively. So we have to figure out what is their perception, how do they like to communicate back and forth, and then how do we successfully provide that communication that gives them the perception that we desire. Absolutely. So I warn people sometimes, you want to say, well, that's not true, and you get into a battle back and forth. You got to remember, their perception is their reality. So how do I, maybe lack of better phrasing, attack that? Right. So that's got to be my game plan.
Yeah, they believe it to be true, and, yes. And you know you have the facts, but that may not sway them, right? So
unless you give it to them in the correct way. So that goes back to that whole thing,
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. And perception is reality. That is so huge. We talk about in communications, we talked about 2 months ago in the first one, we were talking about crisis communications and providing information proactively as much as possible, because if you don't, people will make up their own story, and they will fill in dots that connect dots that you're not connecting for them. The same thing just happens day to day. It doesn't have to be a crisis. People create their own story. They have their own perception, their own reality, and you need to think about how you're going to communicate with those groups for sure. So I put together a slide here, and those of you who are school leaders, educators might disagree with me, but I just for fun, put this together. If our message is, if the school's message is, we're reviewing our science curriculum with plans to roll out something new next year, right? Maybe not a totally foreign concept. We're looking at this. We want to do something presumably better in the future. If that was simply the statement with no context added for a specific group, there could be a lot of people filling in the blanks and a lot of questions they're going to be asking. So teachers might say, thank goodness, I can't wait to stop using these old textbooks. I'm not a teacher. My wife is. She's not a Lutheran school teacher. She's a public school teacher, but I know teachers. So, I could see this being a potential reaction. This is a good thing. I'm glad to be moving forward. Parents might say, that's good, but have my kids been getting outdated instruction? I've been a Lutheran school parent for a long time now, right? And I know that budgets can be tight. And well, if we're doing this, what have we been doing the last 5 years where we've been here? And what have the kids been using? School board members might say, well, this is good, right? We definitely need to improve in this area to compete for students. We're glad to see progress. We're moving in the right direction. Let's keep it up. And then not to go to the negative, but leaders, potentially church leadership, maybe people who kind of watch things closely might say, okay, how much is that going to cost us? And so I don't think you would, but this is if you were to put a really simple statement out there, it can be received a lot of different ways by a lot of different groups. And we're going to show a little bit later some examples of putting context around things that can get people to where you want them to get to, hopefully, with your messaging. So who are your school's audiences? I'm not telling you anything you don't know here, but we know that your school's audiences are teachers, of course, support staff, parents and guardians, your school board, pastors, church leadership, of course, depending on your arrangement and how you're organized as an entity, students, community members, probably the list goes on and on. I just wanted to collect a few here to get people to thinking, hey, there are a lot of different groups that we talk to. And not to say that every message you send out needs to be differentiated 8 different ways based on this list, but there's considerations to be done, and we'll have some questions a little bit later to think about these different groups in different ways.
A significant one for me that I would add to that, I didn't think about it earlier this morning, but especially if you're a high school, alumni. Because, you know, that fundraising message or building project or something else, and that can be a real impact there. Again, I really like this because big communications, you know, I used to write down just that, a list of, okay, here are my constituent groups, and know who they are, kind of figure out, okay, each one, have I hit them all? Am I going to hit them in a way with this communication that really sells it to that group so that they know what it is I'm talking about? They get the message clearly, effectively at the end. I've left them with something. And again, I always, there's great graphics out there to grab. You chose an outstanding one here. Today's world, it is a mismatch, mishmash, and everything else about all those lines up there. Everybody is interconnected, right? And as soon as you release something and you think, oh, well, I've crafted it for this group, it's already gone to the other groups too. So you know, in today's world, right? Thanks to Facebook and Instagram and person-to-person, a parking lot that's out there in front of your school, just all of the interactions and teacher to teacher. That's the world that we live in, is instantaneous communication. So know that anytime you are releasing, it looks like this, where it's flying all over the place. So recognize that.
Absolutely, yeah. And as much as you want to differentiate, and you should differentiate, you know that. And there's a little bit of this later in some slides. What we say to this group it might be shared with other groups, or they might be asked by other groups about what they know. And so just thinking about those connections is really important.
Yeah, and you really, you know, sensitive information, don't think that you can release it to one group without it going somewhere else. And you might think, oh, well, I can give this to my, you know, to maybe the parents or support staff or teachers, and it's going to go somewhere. You know, you got to rely on your board for that. But again, know your audience, tweak it a little bit, differentiate a little bit. And especially if you're talking about sensitive information that you're working in a strategic plan with down the road, you might talk about broad term with most of these groups. Your school board, you're probably going to be differentiated to much more a specific item, a cost amount, a projected target that you're fundraising. It's going to be a building project that we're working on. And you don't want that out too soon, because if you mention building project outside of that to a different group, next thing you know, you're going to be feeling emails and phone calls. And
So we look at this list of audiences and thinking about which of these audiences most important. Primary audience maybe should be communicated to first. And I would suggest that audience is your staff. Again, found this image on Google, so thank you to St. Matthew Lutheran School, wherever this is, for your staff photo. But to me, staff is such a critical place to start with your messaging and your communications for a lot of reasons that we'll talk about in a couple slides here. And I did want to share this also back in 2018, which is a long time ago now, but I was fortunate enough at Concordia Plans to lead a study we did of Lutheran school teachers. And we asked a lot of questions, but we asked this question about what can administration at your school be doing to better support you? And communication was number two, really kind of the first non-money item. We asked people to not consider benefits and salary, and of course resources may kind of be a budget type thing. So really that number one item I would kind of consider it is communication. That's what teachers were looking for. They're looking to know what's going on, to be communicated with, maybe for that chance for two-way communication was really, really important to them.
Yeah, this plays out, and I mentioned it in our earlier session today. Just anecdotally, it plays out. I hear this all the time from schools, educators and administrators, boards, the congregations of those that have the schools. We also see it with studies that we do out of school ministry. Our accreditation, self-studies, we hear it in. Lutheran School Consulting Services and our visits to schools that perhaps want to grow or they're struggling with an item. Communication always is at the top and typically we struggle with communication. People don't know what we're doing, or teachers hear it after everybody else has heard it, or we don't ever hear from the school or for the congregation. School relationship thrives on the communication. So communication, most definitely, I'll support you in this. I know your own study, and I utilize this study when I go and talk, because I say, here you go, this is reporting of it. But certainly our information says it too, that we struggle with that. And when we do communicate, we don't do it well. Thus, this session and all the sessions that we've invited you to lead.
We talked earlier, you certainly don't want, your staff members sitting at the softball game with a parent, and the parent says, well, I heard about this, blah, blah, and your staff member says, I didn't hear that. That's not a good look for you or for the school or for that staff member. I mean, that person should be in the know, right? If something is being shared externally.
And it really harms your trust in the school. And when you harm that trust, it harms your culture, it harms your climate. It's tough to really strategically move forward in a positive way. It does a lot to disrupt the community. So, as we always say, we don't want to be caught off guard as leaders. And as leaders, we really don't want our people to be caught off guard either. You don't want them to be caught at a softball game, and you don't want a board member to be caught off guard somewhere. It's not healthy all the way around.
Yeah, so the next two slides, a lot of it we've already talked about, so I'll go through it fast, are about internal communications. I am in charge of internal communications at Concordia Plans. We're a pretty big organization, but it's the most internal communications work I've done in my career, and I've learned a lot about it. And I would just emphasize how important good internal communications is for your school environment. It's critical for us. I work with some really strong HR people who have a really good understanding of workplace culture and things like that. And so I really value highly the importance of internal communications. And for us at Concordia Plans, it's if our people are feeling engaged and informed and communicated with, we believe they're going to serve better. And they do. Those interactions are better with ministries and members. And so think about how that translates to maybe the school environment. So a lot of this we talked about already. So why are internal communications important? It's that alignment. Al mentioned trust already, employee engagement, employee performance and feedback. The last two I bolded. These are kind of what we talked about the first couple sessions of Tuesday Talks. 2 months ago, we talked about crisis communications. The fact that if there is a crisis going on, you really need your internal staff to be as informed as possible or as realistic. We know there are some things that can't be shared with everybody, but informed as possible in case they are asked by a friend who happens to have kids that go there or whatever the case is. And of course, brand image, that consistent branding and messaging we talked about last month. Keeping staff informed will help them be ambassadors or spokespeople or representatives for your school or your school and church more than if you were not keeping them informed. So that's really critical, is thinking about them as representatives of your school out there, keeping them engaged. You don't want them to end up like our friend in the meme here who doesn't know what's happening here, is not going to ask.
I think even with what you mentioned before with Concordia Plans, engaging your employees, communicating with them, and we always talk quality and not quantity, because there's that fine line of, well, now I'm just getting a whole bunch of stuff and it doesn't really apply to me, and you just wasted 5 minutes of me, or you wasted an hour in this meeting where you could have sent me an email with 5 bullet points and done the same thing. Yeah. But also when you do the quality and you do the engagement, that's, to me, always a two-way street. You start to see communication then improve from those groups that you're communicating with back to you and with one another. So, employees start to engage more in that communication cycle and loop. They also engage more with you because you're communicating with them. And with crisis management and brand image and so on, you can't necessarily divulge everything. That's one of the...
You shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's life of an administrator. Yeah. You know things that you don't necessarily want to know, but and you have to know them. And I can't give teachers that same information, but it's also that understanding, that conversation with teachers in terms of just honesty and being upfront and saying, look, I'm going to give you what I can and provide you everything that I can, but then you also have to know there are just some things, one, I can't give to you because of privacy or other matters, and two, trust me, there are things that you don't want me to give to you because otherwise it would hinder your ministry and what you're doing. So, but we need to have that conversation because otherwise you think I'm hiding something. It's not hiding. It's protecting individuals and it's protecting you so that you can do ministry as well.
Yeah, for sure. Last thing on this, and then we'll move over to some more messaging stuff. Internal communications, we talked about this. Teachers are kind of external ambassadors. Parents are most likely to go to the child's teacher. When I was in public school districts, I worked for a small district here in St. Louis and central office. And we were very aware of the fact that our teachers were that front line and that if parents have questions, have concerns, they are most likely to go to their child's teacher. It's convenient. There's a relationship there. It's just that just makes the most sense. Principals, assistant principals would be next. And those of us who were in central office were probably the last resort, right? Unless things were really out of hand or something, whatever was happening. So teachers play that critical role. And their experience can and probably do influence how they represent the school. So you don't want them to be just like, Charlie Brown's teacher who you can't understand. You want to give them a message, something to say as much as possible.
Yeah, so you want to empower your teachers so that they have the knowledge. I would also speak to the teachers, though, and remind them it's okay not to know an answer to something. Exactly. So if you don't know it, don't make something up. Just say, hey, I don't really know that, but here's what you can do, and you can email the principal, and here's the email address or whatever else.
Yeah, hopefully they don't say, I don't really know that. They never tell us anything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that does happen.
I'm always in the dark.
That happens.
So totally agree, right? We say that about other types of communications and messaging. If you don't know the answer, that's okay. Find it out.
But again, that's a communication tool from the administrator to the faculty, because otherwise the faculty, you get that question from a parent, you don't know it, so you're trying to bake something up because you want to look like you know it.
Right. Yeah.
Empower them to say, hey, I don't know it, but you know what? Go to the principal, here's the email address, or I know they'll be in the morning or whatever else.
So that's my little spiel on internal communications. Again, I see a lot of importance in that. So hopefully you've got that working for you or can maybe focus on that. So thinking about differentiating the messaging or communications, I put some examples together. I apologize, these are not examples that are applicable to your school. These are actually examples that are applicable to what we do at Concordia Plans. But we were already working on this, so I thought it was a good fit to share. And the simple message that we're wanting to share, I'm going to put some boxes up on the screen here in a second. The simple message that we want to share is that at Concordia Plans, we impact ministry by. And what happens next is, we help workers become and stay healthy. We help workers save for retirement. Hopefully that takes a burden off of them. We provide resources to ministries. I'm not doing a little commercial here. It kind of sounds like I am, but that's kind of the key messaging. But how is that message kind of packaged up and delivered for different groups? That's what I'm going to share with you now. Again, maybe not applicable to you, but thinking about how we approach these types of things.
Really, I do think it's great for schools. I think it is applicable to schools because this is really what we want to think about are those categories, those constituent groups. Yeah. And again, it's used in the business world. This is what you want to do because you want to go through this as a project. Same thing in schools. I mean, sometimes we forget that communication is across the board. It's for organizations, whether you're in a for-profit world, a nonprofit world, a school world, communications is at the top of the list. Quality communication for a successful entity, organization, again, no matter what realm that you're in. And I think each one of these boxes is great. In fact, I would encourage school leaders, take each box and do a little session with your educators and with your board members and do a little self-study. What about our different audiences? Who are they in the little description that you do with each one?
A little slightly different. You can see on here, I've got ministries that are the far right top, ministries that are not a part of Concordia Plans. Thankfully, most are, but some aren't. And I have ministries that are part of Concordia Plans. Yours might be our current parents and prospective parents, or alumni might be a box or something. But I won't read through everything here, but just you get the idea here, right? On the internal side, we're talking about how your work is impacting ministry. Build people up as much as we can, like you are doing important work. And that is really critical for us. And I'll just say this real quickly. You know, we work here in the International Center, and a lot of our people don't get to go out and visit ministries. I'm fortunate, I get to sometimes, and I know people in ministry. A lot of people don't. So we try to tell them, this is the impact that you're having, right, on ministry. As far as the board might go, think about it from we're competing for business. We are competing for business against other retirement plans and health plan providers and things like that. So we are impacting ministry effectiveness. The non-CPS ministry, you want to be a part of this. We're all working together. It's all better together. That's a big part. It's a big message for us. For the current CPS ministry, we do kind of use that better together messaging, but also we're talking about outcomes. We are taking care of your workers. We are helping them realize positive outcomes. This is how we're impacting ministry. And then for members, we talk about we are with you. We will be with you through your entire career. You have resources that impact your ability to serve, including ... We're impacting ministry by ... It's not 100% perfect that you can fill in the blank on every single one exactly the same, but the concept being that we're setting up a core message, and this is the way to kind of get to these people. I can guarantee you that we do not present the goals, the organizational goals, to our staff the same way that our CEO presents them to the board. It's just different. You communicate differently. And I'm sure you're doing that already when you're thinking about your different audiences. But to Al's point, it might be a good exercise to go through and say, how are we talking to these groups? How have we been? So the last few slides here, just a couple more left, are kind of some key questions that we might want to ask ourselves as we're thinking about differentiating communications. So what groups must find out first? I would submit that in most cases that is going to be your staff, is going to make the most sense. What kind of domino effect or what kind of web will that set off? If you think about that image earlier that Al commented on, people know people who know other people who will get back to other people. So what kind of web or domino effect will that have? And how can I use these people in a good way to further the message with other key groups? If I am going to go to teachers first, or teachers and staff first, how can I maybe utilize them to then share a message with the parents? What role could I ask them to play in sharing this critical message? Now, this isn't like the day-to-day kind of stuff, but if there's something big going on and the word is going to be spreading, and you can say to the teachers, I'm going to give you the information I can give you, everything I can give you right now, and if you are asked by a parent, this is some information might help you respond, right? Don't write them a script necessarily, unless you have to, but think about how can you equip them to answer questions from other groups potentially. Some last questions to ask yourself when formulating a message. What do we want this audience to do? What do we want them to believe? What do we want them to think? What do we want them to feel? That kind of thing. What do we want them to know? Do they have sufficient background information to understand this message? Do they have the context that they need to understand what they're hearing or why they're hearing it? How are they likely to respond, and how have they responded previously to similar information? Maybe you'd say, 2 years ago, we had something kind of similar come up, and we didn't handle the communications very well. We didn't do this in the right order, or we didn't have the right messaging, or we didn't have all the facts. How did we handle that in the past? How did they respond, and how can we do better? Learn from those things, right? So that's really critical as you're piecing this together. And then thinking down the line as it progresses, what questions or concerns are they likely to have? Can I address those proactively? Who are they likely to communicate with? We talked about that already. Who do they know? Where will they turn for more information or answers? And what additional resources can I provide them? Can I provide them some additional background information? Or maybe there's a link, LCMS School Ministry or your district has, or whatever information you might be able to provide. But what resources can I provide them to better position them to know what I want them to know and potentially be able to answer questions that might come to them? So those are listed, 8 or 10 questions you can ask yourself as you're thinking about communicating with different audiences, critical communications. The last slide here, I actually had in the first presentation, which is the core of our messaging, is that in schools, everything is about the kids. There's always a way to tie that message back to the care of the children in your school in a Christian environment, raising up young men and women in a Christian environment. That's why we do what we do. And so you can always and should always bring back, this is happening, this is changing, this is new, this is going away, whatever it is, and how that relates to the kids and the ministry that you're providing there to children and their families. That is what I have. We got a little more time for discussion and of course questions if anybody has any. I'll put my information up here. I said it last time and I am more than happy if you have questions about this topic or any school communications topic. I'd be more than happy to have the conversation. Of course, it's not my full-time job, but it is a passion of mine. So if you have questions about crisis communications or proactive communications or responsive or whatever it is, and I can be of help, quick phone call, Zoom discussion, whatever it is, I'd be happy to do that. So there's my information, or you can definitely go through Al or Will to find me if you don't remember my name and would like to make contact. So that's what we had for the presentation today.